Hi, I'm Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvies episode, this time talking about an SSD or solid-state drive upgrade on the HP Mini. Now, some of you might know that a few months ago I did a review of a lot of different netbooks, and the HP Mini I thought was nice, but I thought it had a lot of limitations. Well, here's the funny thing. I travel quite a bit on business trips, and I always take a netbook or a computer with me. And I found that I was taking the HP Mini with me more than any other computer, because despite its limitations, it had many pluses. First of all, it's just a little bit thinner. It's just a little bit lighter. Even though the screen is approximately 9 inches, it's very clear. It has a nice keyboard, and it probably has the best volume and the best tone of any netbook out there that I've tried so far. So those characteristics really made me want to use the Mini, and I was able to work around a lot of its limitations. For instance, even though it doesn't have a video port, for my purposes, I could load a PowerPoint presentation, for instance, on a flash drive and just use the computer that was available. They're not very complicated, so as long as I was careful about looking after fonts and things, it wasn't much of a big deal. But the biggest limitation I had with this computer was its tiny 8 gigabyte hard drive. And this is running XP, so 8 gigabytes is just not very much. In fact, I always felt like a woman with a small purse. I was always taking stuff out, putting stuff in, making sure that my temporary files were cleared, and despite all my best efforts, the size of the files kept on increasing because there's always those updates and security patches and things that wind up in your computer. Well, when a company called Active Media came out with a solid-state drive option, an aftermarket option, I decided to try it. And that's what this is going to tell you about this particular tutorial. It's going to look at putting that solid-state drive into the Mini, going in my case from an 8 gigabyte too small drive to a very spacious 32 gigabyte drive. So let's see how I did that. Okay, we're going to look at actually installing this little drive into the HP Mini 1000. The only place that I could find that you could purchase this drive was Amazon.com. The one that I'm showing here is the 16 gigabyte drive, which sells for under $70, so I think it's a very reasonable price. The one that I actually installed looks identical to this drive, but it's the 32 gigabyte size. And it comes in a very kind of plain wrapper container like this. The only thing I would say good about the container is you can store your old drive and it just is a backup if you choose to. There's not a lot of information that comes with the drive. In fact, the only thing that you get is a little warning that says to be careful about the ZIF connector, because if you screw it up, it's not covered by the warranty. And the ZIF connector is this little connector down here. This is where you're going to connect the drive to the computer via a ribbon cable. It has a little clamping piece of plastic over that you can kind of push down on it to seal the connection. And it's very, very important before you start yanking at those ribbon cables to release that clamp. Otherwise, you're going to rip it off and you basically have made the drive not functional. This is what we need to actually put the drive in, not much. First, of course, you need the computer, and you need the hard drive. No big surprise there. You're also going to need some sort of little jeweler's type of screwdriver. A lot of times they sell these in kits like this one here, or they come in other types of kits. Any hardware store will have these little kits. You could often get them at dollar stores too for a couple bucks. Definitely worth it. Not just for this particular job, it's absolutely necessary for this job, but for a lot of other little gadgets that you have around the house, they all seem to have these little tiny screws on them. And then I think it's a good idea to have a pen and paper so you can jot down or diagram different things as you're trying to reassemble the unit back together. Sometimes it's easy to forget, was the item this way or this way? And if you make a few diagrams, that solves that problem. Lastly, once the thing is all assembled, you're going to have to reinstall your operating system and software. So make sure you have your operating system CDs around, and also you're going to need a DVD drive that's external, a USB drive. And here I would say make sure that that drive works with the HP before you go through this whole process. Alright, you're going to first take out the battery off the bottom of the case, and to do that you just move these levers in the bottom and lift up. When everything's out, you see this cavity here, and the first thing to do with this cavity is to remove these two screws. These two screws actually mount the keyboard to the rest of the case, and so you got to get those up because the keyboard needs to be lifted to get at the components. Once those are out, and they're very small, so make sure you put them in a little bowl or something, you have to then gently put your finger and press through this hole over here, and that's going to push the keyboard up a bit. You may need to gently pry on the sides of the keyboard, like where these arrows are indicating, but it really comes out pretty easily. So now the keyboard is out, and I've actually removed it, and you can see there's a bunch of components. The one that we're interested in is this one here, which is actually the holder for the solid-state drive. And the way that you get that out is you're going to remove these two screws that are indicated over here. Now, you also want to detach the ribbon cable, and remember, you've got to lift up that little clamping lever to remove the ribbon cable from the actual hard drive assembly. A lot of cables are located in this area that I'm showing here. The one thing that you can't see is right down here is a connector with a ribbon cable missing. That was the cable to the keyboard, and since I removed the keyboard, you no longer see the cable there. Alright, here we can see the two drives. The one on the right that says SanDisk, that's the original 8 GB drive. The one that's just getting ready to get screwed into the mounting case on the left is the new 32 GB drive. The one thing that I would say, at least with my particular drive, is that the ZIF connector was on the opposite side compared to the SanDisk drive. You basically go through the steps in reverse to put everything back together, and then what do you do now? Well, now you have to load the software. So you're going to plug in your DVD drive into your USB port, and then as you're booting up the computer, you're going to press the F9 key, which gives you a boot up sequence selector, and you're going to select the boot up drive as being your CD or your DVD ROM drive, I should say, and that's going to then boot your Windows disk. So your Windows disk has to be in there. This process will take you to that booting from that sequence, and you just go through then the steps to install Windows, as I'm doing here. After you have completely installed Windows, then you're going to insert the driver DVD in. After a few clicks, that will automatically install all the drivers onto the Mini 1000, and you're all set. You basically have an operating system and all your drivers loaded. Lastly, of course, if you have any additional software, which I'm assuming you would have, that has to get installed too. So really, the longest process here is installing the software. Well, there you have it. A way to upgrade your HP Mini to a much bigger drive. I personally think the 16 GB drive is probably going to be enough for most people if they're careful. It's less than $70. For a little bit over $100, you can go up to 32 GB. That's what I did. I wanted the biggest drive I could get. Either way, you're going to vastly improve the quality of your Mini, because not only will you be getting a bigger drive where you can store a lot more programs and other things, but it's also a faster drive too, so it's just going to boot up and do other things a little bit faster. Don't forget to listen to my free podcast too. It's full of lots of great information on psychiatry, psychology, and general well-being. Just search in iTunes under the podcast section for Michael Kuna, Kuna, MD, or Psychiatric Secrets Revealed. Thanks, and have a great day.